based on that.
What we're referring to, if you're listening for the first time and you have no idea what's going on, is we have a going bet on the show that Jordan Peterson is actually a Christian, and so
or will become one.
Or will become one, and Josh Hughes
by the end of this year.
Bet that by the end of this year, Jordan Peterson will be a professing Christian, at which point he will win $100. Now, apparently, from all three of us, as he continues to grow the bet.
I don't even know if it's all three of you. To be fair, this is what I'm getting at. I don't even know who actually disagreed with me.
On recorded video. Why are you trying to gaslight us?
I'm not gaslighting you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the I'm Telling God About This podcast. Today, we are on our continued journey of understanding Jordan Peterson's faith journey. Why does this matter? Because I'm trying to collect $100, all right? Whether or not I'm collecting $100 from all three of them or whoever it is that's not... that goes without saying.
Like you're the anti-Faust?
Comment down below what I should spend $300 on by the end of this episode. We'd like to know what you think the best, and don't say tithe, okay?
Wait.
We already covered that in the last episode too.
How does it keep increasing? Do we get like interest?
That's what I said. I don't know. Is it $100 per each?
You said $100. Now it's $300. I don't.
Who's against me?
Are we doing back pay? Are we doing back pay? Like if it turns out that he was actually a Christian for a year, do we get interest based on that?
What we're referring to, if you're listening for the first time and you have no idea what's going on, is we have a going bet on the show that Jordan Peterson is actually a Christian, and so
or will become one.
Or will become one, and Josh Hughes
by the end of this year.
Bet that by the end of this year, Jordan Peterson will be a professing Christian, at which point he will win $100. Now, apparently, from all three of us, as he continues to grow the bet.
I don't even know if it's all three of you. To be fair, this is what I'm getting at. I don't even know who actually disagreed with me.
On recorded video. Why are you trying to gaslight us?
I'm not gaslighting you.
Look, I will accept,
or two of you, or one of you. I don't remember.
I will accept a Starlink Mini as a payment. So just be ready.
So anyway,
or a 3D
printer. And listen, folks,
3D printer.
That's good too. All those things cost $300, so those are all reasonable, right? So comment down below. What do you think is a reasonable thing? So,
and if you think he's a Christian, comment down below.
Yeah, we would love to
like and subscribe.
So why are
we hope he
again?
is? We hope he is. Let's just preface this.
Of
We're
course.
all on board, and we hope that he is.
Listen,
he's just not.
If this is your first time joining us, this is the deal. We love Jesus. We love you. This is a podcast for Christians. That's the people that the target audience is. If you're not a Christian, you're still welcome to join us. But just understand, this is like going into a room full of football fans. You know, everyone there's on the same side. But if you got people who like different teams, there's going to be some conflict and a little bit of, elbow throwing and some other things like that. So, don't get all upset about Catholic jokes and
that's good. I was worried you were going to say something that was going to trivialize the fate of someone's eternal soul.
No, why would we do that? We don't do that here. Anyway, so why are we having this conversation today? Well, a couple weeks, it was really last week. It might have been 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah,
when this event happened, but there was a major, some sort of rally or event where Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand were both on stage, and Russell Brand, who I don't think anybody is questioning whether this dude's sold out for Jesus. Like, I don't think I've seen a harder right turn.
Deep Twitter
you haven't seen
Reformed
anybody?
Guys are absolutely just trying to tear him up and find anything.
Well, they're Reformed.
We're not trying
Christians
to find
need our own.
With Russell Brand, I'll tell you where I... What?
He's baptized and converted more people than most of you Reformed bros, so you can
I'm not saying there's no legitimacy there.
Baptized people in his undies, and that counts.
I have the same reservations about Jordan Peterson as I do about like the OnlyFans girls who find Jesus and they just parlay them. I'm not saying it's the same.
Okay.
I'm saying it's you're doing a lot of the same kind of public persona things that you did before, and so there's a through line of it could be self-serving. Right, and that's something he's going to have to work out, right? And that's not to say I think it's entirely illegitimate. Just that you could look at it and say, "Well,
we can do a whole episode." I think we should do a whole episode on that because he's actually addressed some of those exact things and his own internal processing and struggle with that, which I give him. I'm very much excited and happy for him, and I'm judging by fruit. I'm not saying there's not risk; there always is, but but I'm excited about that, which is why we're excited about this, because what we see here, right, in this clip that Nick will bring up in a second, is Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson doing the Lord's Prayer to kind of close out. I think we were closing out this event, right? And if you've paid attention to anything, and we're going to watch a bunch of clips we've got queued up to talk about, like, to try to understand where he's at. Because one thing we know for sure about Jordan Peterson is he doesn't say anything directly. Like, I mean, next to beginning his sentences as, you know, well, I was raised in a middle-class family, that, you know, Jordan Peterson is like close second, all right, to talking around what he's trying to say. The only difference is Jordan Peterson actually knows what he's talking about and is super excited about, you know, digging into all the nitty gritty. But it makes it confusing when you're trying to win a bet. So we're going to break it down. So with that, Nick, show us. So this is
during the Lord's Prayer. This was the spark of us wanting to have this conversation, because we were like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening?
Oh, Faja.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Jordan saying it.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into
The Harvey Dent suit, he pulls it off.
He does.
power and glory forever and ever. Amen.
Brother, hey,
look
get
at that.
The little fist pump.
Hey.
He did it in KJV, so he's extra saved. I don't know.
And that's true. And look at that posture. Like the posture. Like, this is a man who is a like hyper intellectual, right? Super big on, you know, paying attention to details and what he does. He's obviously super deliberate in how he, you know, what he wears, what he says, all these different things. Like, to assume a posture of humility in that context is a recognition of something. I think that's pretty apparent. And
well, I would say too, like, that was the reason we were like, hey, maybe we should actually finally have this conversation on the pod, because we have been watching him closely this entire time, but there has been no footage of the man praying that I know of. And that is, I would say, a significant mile marker of other things that we will discuss and that we will see. But it was enough for me to say, okay, yeah, I think we're ready to have this conversation, not because we're trying to pin him down, because we are celebrating what's happening in our culture. We're celebrating what might be happening in Jordan Peterson's heart. And we're not really trying to say, look at us, we got another one on our side, but maybe a little bit. And I think there's something to acknowledge there. So yeah, this episode is more about what is happening in our culture at this greater scale. And then we can talk about the implications of, you know, Jordan Peterson's messages on faith, belief in God, and Christianity, because I would argue strongly that there's no one that has had a greater influence for the cause of Christ in the last 5 years than him at a national scale. I'm talking volume. I'm not talking...
Wait, national America or national Canada? Because those are different leagues.
National America.
not really, though.
Well, I mean, I would say globally, his voice has been out there globally for a lot of people.
I told you guys this on another episode, but there was a dude who shared his testimony in church just 2 weeks ago, and verbatim words out of his mouth where he started listening to Jordan Peterson, at which point then was turned back on to God, at which point then decided to dedicate his life and become saved. And like, I hadn't heard that one time, and I was like, what is happening?
Well, Jordan Peterson has actually done probably more for the secular sphere with the Bible, and he did some lectures on the Bible from a psychological standpoint, which I think, you know, wrong take, wrong approach when you're doing exegesis. However, he did have a bunch of very intellectual people around, from Dennis Prager to some Orthodox, some you know, Protestants and stuff like that around table to go through Exodus, which I thought was really good. And so they literally would go through, you know, Exodus. Did they do Genesis too?
Genesis was the first and most famous lecture series of the Bible that
Well,
the
I'm
most
talking about
viewed
like when
of
he had like the round table with
then that
other
was
people
Exodus.
Yeah.
So
he did
Exodus, and the cool thing about that was like he would actually bring up these theological concepts, and it's really cool to see from the secular perspective, from the Reformed Jewish perspective or conservative Jewish perspective, and everything. And that was really cool. I like my favorite part was when Dennis Prager was kind of trying to like, okay, I went and I wrote a commentary on the Old Testament, and Os Guinness, a British theologian, was like, yeah, and this word means that, and he's like, how did you know that? Like, yeah, because we study the Old Testament too, bro. Like, that was real. But,
there were actually a bunch
like,
of comedic elements of that because they every once in a while they say things in like this really erudite, profound way, but it's like, guys, that's just baseline Christian theology.
Like,
that's right.
I'm all like, good job, guys. Good job. And it's at this point where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if you can take them off the flannel graph and put them in the furnace, then,
that's right.
then who's the fourth man in the furnace? Can you guys tell me? Ben Shapiro? Who's the fourth man in the furnace, Ben?
Oh my
God! Can you tell me who is that? It's Jesus.
Anyway, it's amazing
sorry.
how Scripture has such a profound way of speaking so much truth,
making simple
and it's
the
like
wise.
all you have to do.
Wise the simple.
Exactly, all you have to do is read it, and it is more powerful and profound than any philosopher and any other, talking head in history.
It's very
just
similar to
wonderful.
Paul. I think there's a lot of parallels here to Paul. In looking at, I'm not trying. Please don't mishear this. I'm not comparing Jordan Peterson
No, it's too
to
late.
Paul.
It's too late.
It's
It's
happening.
Angry
All right,
comments
but I'm
have
gonna
started.
When's his road to to Damascus moment going to
That's what
happen?
we're talking
Josh?
about.
So
We're already
adding to the bet,
talking.
Jordan
So-
Peterson gets converted by having
Changes
a vision
his
of Jesus.
name.
That's the changes his name to
What's Jordan?
Jourdain. I don't know.
Jourdain. I don't know. Anyway,
Joash.
but it's very similar because that it's the pedigree, right? So there's a level of acceptance and pedigree that that Paul brought to the conversation of or kind of defining and outlining New Covenant theology in the short span. I mean, that's why he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. I think that was intentional. I think God did that on purpose. And I think that there's a parallel in this context where, here's a man who is clearly gifted, who is very, smart and had made the observations based on just first principles. And I think that's why a lot of people have a hard time with Jordan Peterson, is because he works from first principles.
Yeah.
He does not do what we commonly do in the West, which is just cite other smart guys to build his argument. He goes down to the root level. So when you go and you ask a question, and Nick will have a clip on this, I'm sure, but because you ask a question like, do you believe in God? Jordan's first question is, what do you mean by believe? Mm-hmm. What does that word mean to you? And
which
for a lot of
sounds
people,
like a dodge initially, but when you're
it's
going
not.
from a first principles standpoint, you kind of have to okay.
And-
but to the
and he's-
layperson, they're looking like, come on, just
It's
answer the
frustrating.
question.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And that's the
All right,
difference.
well, let's listen to some of it because I
Yeah,
don't
good
actually
call.
watch this stuff on my own separately. I'm interested to see what you
this is
feel has merited you $100.
All right, so the next clip I have is this what you're referring to right now. We're not going to watch, obviously, this whole thing, but the one moment I wanted to double-click on is the personal nature of the question, which I very much respect. So I want us to equally acknowledge, which I kind of already did earlier, we are wanting to do this respectfully to honor him as well, but then to equally share about the cultural significance.
Do I believe in God? And I don't like that question. And people have complained at me a lot, and I'm sure they have their reasons because they don't like my answers, and I have two answers. They've kind of become stock, which is not a good thing. But they're the best approximate. I can't figure out why I don't like the question exactly. I had three sort of burgeoning hypotheses. One was, it's none of your damn business. That's the first one. So it was
solid.
It seemed to me to be a question that was too private to be answered properly. And so
It's
Here,
not
pause
wrong.
right here. Pause right here.
Cop out, maybe it is. And then
Okay, so this is one I want to highlight because I think this speaks to. So as he's coming into understanding Christianity and he's exploring his belief in God, he's doing so, I think, from a very a deep philosophical and assessing all of the things scientifically. But what I think he has yet to really connect with is the mission, in the purpose of what Jesus was here to do, right? Because this video, I think, highlights, and I think this is evident in a lot of his answers, is he has not fully wrapped his brain around why professing faith, why living, he understands the importance of action and doing versus speaking, but why his testimony matters. And that is a fundamental, I think that's a line in spiritual maturity, is there's first what you need to understand for yourself as a person, that you're a sinner saved by grace through faith, right? But then to understand, when you understand why salvation is even available to you, and more importantly, why God would then leave you alive and have you, and so what now? Then you come to understand the importance of why your story matters, and in the context of both Christian community and in the secular world. And so that's something that comes with time, is kind of my point, and so, like, just because somebody doesn't get that off the gate doesn't mean that they're not,
right.
Well, I mean, oftentimes he also very accurately, which we're going to find out and discover and see, he does, in my opinion, a better job of double-clicking on belief, and back to that first principles thinking style that he does, where he goes to the root, because he very tactfully disassembles the quick argument around just say the words and you're good, and he immediately connects to, it's your actions. You say you believe, but your actions matter more. And he really pulls on some of the thread in Scripture where you show up at the gates and God's like, depart from me, I never knew you. Because saying you believe is one thing, acting as if you believe is a whole nother thing.
And I love that, because, and he talks about this too, but this is one that we get wrong, and it's a semantic problem. One of the biggest things I've found in Christianity in the English language in our context is English is just a garbage language. It really is. It is a horrible, lazy amalgamation of the slang of German and French and, like, Old English. Like, it's so sloppy. So, like, when we talk about words, we use words like believe. Like, there's a different, and this is why we get into these semantic arguments about, like, faith and works and faith. It's the term believe is what captures that, but we don't understand our vocabulary well enough. Like, it's one thing to know. I make the distinction know versus believe.
That's
if
good.
If you know something, that doesn't mean that you're going to act on it. Like, I know that, my friend just got his pilot's license. Do I believe he can carry my family and I safely up in a transcontinental flight? Absolutely not. Evidenced by me not doing that, right? I know my child could probably drive a car. I do not believe I will be getting in it and not paying attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, the action is what identifies the belief. That is the difference between knowing something and actually placing risk or value or I'd say it's action motivated by understanding is how I would say it. But that's a common
Let's hop back
problem.
in.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I would say let's hop back in and keep watching a little bit of this just for a sec.
Another one was, well, what do you mean by believe? Like, do you mean the words? Do you mean to say the words, I believe in God? Does that indicate that you believe in God? Like, I don't know what you mean by believe exactly, because, and that's got me in trouble too, because, people think that attempting to clarify the meaning of words is an attempt to escape the question. It's actually an attempt to specify the question. I mean, is what you believe what you say or what you act out?
The truth is behind.
So that is a really important designation that he begins to unpack. And I think we don't need to keep watching it, but he lands the plane hard on it is what you act out that matters, which we're going to see because I'm not going to spoil it, but he double clicks on action being the integral component of defining belief. And I mean, I like that he does that because from my perspective, having grown up in the church, I don't know about you guys, I think too often we have gotten swept up in the just say the words and you're good, and we just gloss over that and keep moving. And that's why we don't see much discipleship, and that's why we don't see deep vibrancy in the word and in our world and in our Christian communities.
If I were to, if I were to try to capture what I think he's going for there and why he's cagey about answering the question, just from what we saw there, it seems like he doesn't know if he can defensively say that he believes in God. He's not sure that he's it's not that clearly I think he would say I think God exists. I bet he would say something like that, but internalizing it to the belief caliber of and I act in accordance with that, I think that's what makes him uncomfortable to claim that mantle that maybe he's just not.
That's a good point, Tim.
You're in for a surprise, Tim.
Oh no!
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting point. Can I just bring up real quick? And one of the kind of the standards in which scripture references is often used is like, well, how does one become saved? We look at Romans 10:9, right? It says, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. And verse 10, people miss this. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. The word believes is a variation of the word pistis, which is faith. That word, and the root word of believe is pistis, is faith. And so this word faith is often, if you look at it as trust or faithfulness, it really describes what Josh was saying earlier. English is horrible, right? We say, how many people think of the word faith and look at it as this blind thing that we're like
Acceptance.
the Mormons. We just believe,
blind
acceptance. It's just, exactly.
Cut that in.
But this word faith is, actually, it is a behavioral stance,
Correct.
right? When you trust something, you actually act as if you trust it. When you are faithful to something, there is no halfway faithfulness, right? So that's why when we're talking about, it's like when the heart, in your heart one believes, because from a Jewish perspective and even a Greek perspective, is like the heart is what controls the actions, or like is the deeper sense of meaning. So anyway, wanted to point that out there. I think that's
good.
That's a good distinction to make.
Yeah, let's hop into the next one. I think you guys will really enjoy this one.
So people often ask me, do you believe in God? I don't like that question. First of all, it's an attempt to box me in a sense. And the reason that it's an attempt to box me in is because the question is asked so that I can be firmly placed on one side of a binary argument. The reason I don't like to answer it is because A, I don't like to be boxed in, and B, because I don't know what the person means by believe or God. And they think they know. And the probability that they construe belief and construe God the same way I do is virtually zero. It's a question that doesn't work for me on multiple levels of analysis. But strangely enough, just as we were talking, the answer to that question popped into my head. I act as if God exists. Now, you can decide for yourself whether that means that I believe in him, so to speak. But I act as if he exists. So people often...
So I nailed it, is what I heard right there.
Yeah. Also, he's autistic.
That's right. Well, I think that he says we define the way he defines belief and the way that he defines God. And he often asks the people what they believe or what they think those words mean, and often he does not agree with them. So I think that it might be an important distinction to say, okay, how would a Christian define those terms? And how is he doing it differently?
Right, he's speaking
Don't ask
to
what
his
they would
perception.
do.
Right.
Oh my gosh!
Right,
I
but
know.
this is my thing.
What's the place that does the survey about what Christians believe, and you find out that like 60% of people who self-identify as Christians are just basically heretics.
100%. And this is what comes. And this is what I appreciate about Jordan Peterson is that, and I think this is his own barrier, and I think he's going to have to wrestle with the concept of grace in this situation. I think he's doing that in his own way, but he understands integrity and being integrated, which is the same idea, right? And so being integrated means that your actions are born out of your understanding, and that they're in line, that they don't deviate. And so he wouldn't claim to be something that he doesn't feel he is accurately representing. If he does not feel like he has integrated his behavior into his understanding, then why would he identify as that? But here's
I totally get that. I don't have a little fish on the back of my car. Like,
right. But here's
do you
Why is
even
that,
Christian,
Tim?
bro? I don't understand.
you don't have a not I but Christ on the back of your cigarette license? Then
You don't wear your WWJD
You don't have a
bracelet
he
anymore?
greater than I. I don't know.
No, when I
So-
see people with the not I but I Christ stickers, I aggressively cut them off to see if they're living it out.
I call it the Jordan Peterson. But the
Oh
issue
my
is,
gosh.
I think that's where he's at, and so he's going to have to wrestle with, again, this gets down to the mission. That's all well and good when you are focused on yourself, what matters to you. To him, it's a pride thing. Because that's what he's built his whole life on, is being right. And what he's going to figure out, if he hasn't figured it out already, is there's a sense of coming to the understanding that you are smaller than God, but there's another piece of becoming a Christian, which is that there are none righteous but God. And I think he has to wrap it. I think what I'm seeing from him is his inability to claim the promises and the grace and the mercy of Christ, because he is trying to integrate him to live with righteous integrity, and so therefore he's missing out on something.
Right.
He doesn't want to be
on
boxed
that.
in, included. You know what I mean? In that.
So you said that it's a pride issue because he prides himself in his whole career on being right about something, right? And there is that risk of, you're wrong, and so then therefore you.
Not that simply. I mean it like.
Okay.
I don't think it's that on the nose. I think it's he internally. He needs to be able to justify whatever he's doing, whether or not it's perceived as right or not. But if he can say, this is why I did this and this is what it is, that's why he won't adopt it, because he can't.
I think in my perspective, congruently to what you're saying, I think he's just very, like, all the clips we're going to see, all the clips we have seen, he takes it very seriously.
Yeah.
More seriously than what I would say most nominal Christians do when he says, I believe.
I agree.
I want to kind of double click on that. And because it sounds to me like if it's a pride issue, it's not just about him being right or wrong, like what you're saying, Josh, but more of like the fear and trembling of the gravity of the decision. But I think that could also be a cop-out, right?
Yeah, I think it's
So
both.
this idea... Yeah, like...
It's those two things together.
Right.
What
but
you
if you're
just
like
said.
so kept from making a decision because your fear of the Lord, that doesn't make sense to me. Tim, you're
We
muted.
lost Tim. We don't have your mic.
Sorry. I think the struggle that makes it difficult to parse exactly where he's at is because obviously you have a certain set of things that happen, sort of right away at the moment of salvation, the moment of accepting Christ as a savior. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of other things that come after in sanctification. And Jordan Peterson seems to be straddling a weird line where some of those things that ordinarily happen right away are coming
Baptism, Jordan. That's what we're looking for the love of God.
And we're wondering if, okay, is the stuff that does seem to have already happened, is that sufficient? And that's I think a hotly debated question is, what exactly is the minimum viable Christian? What do you have to profess?
Well, and that's where I'm saying is, like, just like when we talked about with Elon, is, there's a question of like a long backslidden Christian who's wobbling his way back. But if he did at one point in time confess and believe and then fell away, is he still a Christian? I would say yes, he is. I would say He is a Christian. Now, Jordan, what's weird with him is I don't know if he was when he was younger or whatever.
So he was raised in church. He mentioned this at Liberty University when he spoke several years ago. And he said he was raised in church and his mother still regularly and actively attends church. So, like, there's been little, like, crumbs that he's dropped that are impossible to find unless you were there. But, yeah. So it is interesting where he does flirt with the Elon Musk narrative, which the Elon Musk narrative, if you guys haven't watched that episode, it's a good one. Go back and watch why we think Elon Musk might be a Christian and going to be with us in heaven now. But Elon Musk
thanks to Ethan Nicola at the Babylon Bee.
Said he was baptized when he was a child. And so let's hop into the next clip here, and I think you guys will appreciate some of... I think where we start to see more of his heart on the serious nature of this
with
conversation.
Him with Jonathan?
I think so.
You tell people that you love how to avoid the road to hell. And you don't do that because you're shaking your finger at them or because you're a moral authority. You do it because you don't want them to burn. I think there's too much of the moral authority still, not enough of the love that helps people avoid.
And avoid hell is what he's saying.
Okay. This is what I'm talking about. This is what gets... I'm with you, Tim. The straddling, this weird sanctification and transformation, because here's what I see. What I see... I look at people every day. Every day. I deal with people who are BSing me to try to get out of stuff, and I deal with people who are dealing with real problems and who are having a real, quote-unquote, come-to-Jesus moment. If there's one thing I love about the ministry that I'm involved in, is the sheer volume of stuff I deal with on a given day. When I see that, and I've seen it in a couple of interviews, there is a softness there that I only know comes from one thing.
Yep.
And as I've gotten older, or let me phrase that, as my kids have gotten older, I've started to see a parallel between, like, the effect of the Holy Spirit and a child's reaction to their parent. And
tell me more.
Like the way your kid breaks when they know they've really screwed up. And you're looking at them, and you're not yelling at them or anything, but like when your kid, has that overwhelm, because it's a different kind of emotional response. You either have to be a sociopath, but you either have to be a sociopath, which is possible. Mental health is at an all-time insane place in our country.
Nothing wrong with being a sociopath, just don't eat people.
Yeah, right. But I'm saying, like, to have that kind of level, like, I would say to leave the door open to insanity, which we should always do. Aside from that, man, like, aside from the blatant manipulative nature of something like that, not just that clip, but there's a lot of correct, exactly, that, what it's Psalm 51, right? The sacrifices of God are a broken and contrite heart. And and I see that. And so that's where I'm with you, Tim, where I see, and I say, like, I see the effect of the gospel, because it's what he's upset about. It's how he talks about it. It resonates. I think,
it's funny. He falls into kind of a stereotypical trap there that I think a lot of Christians do, which is like you need to ache for people's souls, and it's not just about, having the, moral authority or whatever. And a lot of Christians feel the same way. A lot of, especially, soft-hearted, empathetic Christians. And it's like, okay, well, you do have to have the moral authority to bring conviction.
For sure.
Before you can pivot to the soft-hearted grace thing. It's like, okay, well, we want to focus on grace. It's like, oh, why do you need grace? Oh, because you're destined for hell, right? Okay.
But you're talking about something that, as a mature Christian, you understand and have that balance. And I think he's
talking about people who he thinks should be receptive to his concern for them, not people who are, thumbing their nose at God, so to speak. It's like, no, some people need the heat and the conviction that your prophet types bring forth.
And I think he's even speaking in that clip. He's really speaking to the popular consensus about Christians. I don't think he's even speaking one thing. He's saying, look, the world. He's talking kind of like to the secular side of the world, where he's like, listen, you look at the behavior of Christians as if it's this, self-righteous finger wagging. But what you don't see is it's the Good Samaritan. Well, who's my neighbor? Right? Like, that's what they're not understanding. Like, and it's also, it's a hard thing for people who aren't exposed to the truth of the gospel to understand, because from any other standard, it's what I believe and know that gives me that authority. But for us, it's that we are subject. We know it's not us, but that's a deeper conversation that the lost, or at least people who are not exposed to, a Judeo-Christian narrative or who didn't grow up in the church, that's going to be incredibly foreign to them. How you can go to somebody and say, your life is wrong, and that you're speaking from an external authority, that it's not you that's saying that. Like, I'm holding a mirror, I'm shining a light on you. I'm just holding the flashlight. The light's bright. It's not me. If I turn the flashlight off, I'm just as dark as you. Like, I'm just as lost as you.
You don't have to be perfect, right?
And I think that's what he's wrestling with, which we're going to see. So in one of the earlier clips, we didn't unpack this part, but he very, I would say, harshly but accurately double clicks on the massive amount of pedophilia in the Catholic Church. And he talks about how he ties that to, I believe in God. And yes, I said double click again. And what he does is
it's
he
our
says,
new word, guys.
Do you not think the priest molesting the child would say, I believe in God? He's a priest. And so he very much is still double clicking on it's your actions. And in this next clip, we're going to see he does that again, where I think the biggest thing Jordan Peterson is wrestling with, and I'm not even saying this doesn't mean he's a Christian or is not a Christian, is that he is taking with impressively amazing severity the be holy as I am holy, that which we are called to walk in, which, as all four of us here know, is very not what we see in the Big C Church today. I think we all could agree that the Big C Church needs to do a better job of practicing holiness, and we give too many things a pass. And I mean, the work that I do
you and I disagree
is
about
regularly
who all's part of the Big C Church.
the work that I do is regularly engaging in that conversation.
Yeah, I
all
agree.
That to say,
of who's the end.
Let's hop into
let's
the
watch
next
the next clip,
and I think you guys will enjoy it. This is him with Dennis Prager.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you can think about Christ from a psychological perspective, and the critic, my critic, this particular critic that I've been reading, said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a representation of, there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because
there is.
It does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it. Like, because I've seen.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, this is one of the first ones. Yep.
I mean,
Sometimes
the music is cut over it. Okay.
the objective world
there's an altar
and the
call here,
narrative
guys.
world touch.
Jonathan's
You know,
like,
that's
"Let's go.
Jungian
Let's
synchronicity.
go."
And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. You know, we have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. Like, we treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know what to... that seems to me oddly plausible. But I still don't know what to make of it. It's too... partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
Got it. Pause that.
Cool.
Dude, that is the
Yeah.
most... That is the
Yeah.
thing that... I don't care. Listen. When you talk to people, you reach a point when you are having a good faith dialogue on evidence. When a person is sincerely trying to understand where you're coming from, it's the Rubicon. And I have seen it. I've walked so many people to this freaking river, this line in the sand, and there are two different groups of people. There are people who look at it and say, I can't because I'm scared. And then there are people who lie to themselves and tell stories and then make a reason to turn around and walk the other way. And the people who look at the river and say, I'm scared, those are the people who cross. Because they are willing to be honest with themselves that if it's true, that their entire understanding of the way the world has been, and especially if they're older, that everything they have done with their life up to this point could have been so wrong and so wasted. And that is terrifying to so many people, and it should be. And so, like, again, when I see that, I'm like, this is well-tilled soil. Like,
right.
When he did 12 Rules, I had this conversation with my brother-in-law. He probably doesn't even remember this, but he was younger and he was talking about, oh yeah, I like this guy Jordan Peterson in his book, and I think it said something to the effect of like, dude, this guy's just one, like, he just hasn't suffered enough. Like, he's gonna hit a point where he's gonna realize he's not smart enough to think his way out of everything. And you know, it seems like from watching that clip, like, when faced with the reality of Jesus and the evidence of his existence and face, like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that?
His whole experience is very, and he even referenced it with C.S. Lewis, is very similar to C.S. Lewis's, because he and Tolkien and Dyson and a few others, you know, part of the Inklings Society, they would go back and forth on this, right? They go back and forth on Jesus and, you know, the power of myth and the power of story, the power of narrative. And one day, while they're walking, Tolkien turns to Lewis and says, you know, or actually Lewis says, you know, this is all well and good, but it still lies, though, you know, spoken through silver with the, you know, so it's like, it sounds really good, but we know that it's not true. And, you know, Tolkien and Dyson, they say something along the lines of, well, you're really moved by these stories of, you know, these myths. What if there was one true myth? What if all these other ones are fake, but what if one of them was real? And I think that's where he kind of leads the conversation to say, well, this man actually existed, and you can go through the historical evidence and you can debate about it, but ultimately at the end of the day, do you believe that he resurrected, that the evidence is plausible? You kind of do have to take based on, because it's not a blind faith, because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Right, so can you reason into this? And so it seems like that started it with C.S. Lewis, where he gave in, and acknowledged, whereas Jordan Peterson is acknowledging it, but has not necessarily submitted, given in. So I think it's a really interesting story. I think their stories are so similar because they are so affected by the story narrative.
But that whole framework, that whole concept of having an archetype, right, and then things fulfilling that archetype, that's an inherently biblical pattern, right? So you mean Adam, David, Moses, all of these things are imperfect shadows of the Christ figure. Like that, there's a reason that archetype, the Christ figure, is literally embedded in the universe. And I mean, even what Hughes referenced about how you see parallels between the way, you relate to your children and they to each other, which mirrors sort of this,
grand design.
The greater thing. And so it's all imprinted at all these various levels, so that even though we can't step directly into the shoes of God, he's embedded enough similarities in your role as a father that allows you to have insight that you wouldn't otherwise gain. And so, we even just generally good stories. I mean, the idea of Christ figures in storytelling is rampant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when Hollywood in particular really became aware of that, probably around the time of The Matrix would be my guess, is they started realizing that they were doing this. They were telling stories and like, oh, we kind of did a gospel thing there, didn't we? And so we started to be very subversive, right, and trying to use different tropes. And then it all went downhill, and it's all garbage because they're specifically avoiding most of the things that are actually impactful, because they're shadows and reflections of the greatest story that we have.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think the idea, I had this thought while you were talking about his situation would be like bringing Leonardo da Vinci to today. Like, he has studied the inner workings of philosophy and all of these different things,
right.
and he's done that with a genuine desire to understand the deeply metaphysical, not just the metaphysical reality of like the physical world, but the intersection of human experience in that. And then imagine, you show up and you get the director's cut. Like, you're exposed to like, no, this is the true narrative. And now you're like, no, yeah, oh, I see how that overlays and how that overlays and how that overlays and how this connects. But he's speaking to it with both the naivete of someone who's seeing it for the first time, but with the depth of understanding of someone who's been studying it without knowing what he was looking at for his entire life.
Mm-hmm. And that's to your earlier point. That was what happened with Paul, right? Been studying it the whole time, and then all of a sudden the right piece falls into the place.
That's exactly it. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, just levels on levels. And that's why I think we're going to see the same thing with him. We're going to see this increasingly humbled, increasingly self-deprecating, increasingly, deepened explanation. And yeah, I mean, do we say it now? Do I say it now? Do I think Jordan Peterson is greatly used by God and becomes a Christian voice of a generation? Maybe. Highly probable.
I think he will, even if at the end of this episode and after more things take place, I think Jordan Peterson, in all of the wisdom we are observing or have observed, is smart enough to know that he can do more if he doesn't overtly say it out loud and identify with one side of the camp. And I don't think he ever will for that reason alone.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Which doesn't mean his heart's not there, by the way.
I disagree. I don't think... Or go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
Before we get to the next clip real quick, and I think that's where maybe worth talking about. You brought up a whole another conversation, so maybe after this next clip
we're going to double click that.
But let me just kind of go back. Yeah, I want to double click back to, and let me circle back. Let me circle back. Let me
get another
right click, break it down. So about what you said with Paul, it's interesting because when Paul came to faith and the road to Damascus, he didn't get the gospel from other Christians. He went to Arabia for 2 years. And then after Arabia, he started preaching the gospel. And it wasn't till about 15 years after or maybe I think it was like 3 years after he was a Christian, that he went to Jerusalem for the first time with Peter and James and said, hey, I wanted to lay and this is, I think, Galatians 2, I wanted to lay before them what I had received from Jesus, right? and they added nothing to me. Basically, you got it, and they gave us the right hand of fellowship, that type of thing. And so it's interesting because he didn't get it from anybody saying, hey, this is what it is. He had all the evidence that was laid there. He just was able to put the gospel together from seeing that one spark. And so in the same way, Jordan Peterson is like Saul, where he sees it all. The evidence is there. He's just not seeing it through the right lens to make it clear.
Oh, I think he
just
is
needs
seeing
that
it.
come to Jesus moment.
I just think he's in
I think
Arabia
he is
right
too.
now. Like, I think he's. I think
there
that's
you
what
go.
I'm saying. I'm saying he just needs to
But
come
that
to the table when you're
that
ready.
would assume
Jordan,
Yeah.
when you're ready, you
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
you're more than welcome.
Let's get this next clip because I think
But
that
let me
there's
get to
probably
this
more
point.
come
No,
on that.
before we get to this clip, because you said something we can't breeze by this because it was a reasonable thing that you said, and I think. Let me make sure I hear
Me?
you right. Yeah,
Who said
Nick.
it? Me?
Sorry, that
Yeah.
Nick said. It was a reasonable thing that Nick said. Where, if I understood you correctly, you're saying that you think that Jordan Peterson believes that he can do more by not overtly coming out as Christian for the gospel, assuming he is a Christian. Then
The only amendment I would make is that I don't know if he connects the dots to I'm doing more for the gospel by not claiming this. I just think he thinks he can do more for humanity by not claiming this.
okay, I would agree with that. Then I think that's what he thinks. Yeah, I think
That's
he
exactly
thinks,
what he thinks.
Yeah, that he's doing
Because that is true.
a-
As soon as he takes a stance, they're going to have
Yep.
alienate half of your audience.
Yep.
Right. But that's one of the things that, let's leave the next clip. But speaking of alienation, that's kind of where I want to land the plane with this when we get through this next section. Cause,
Only
yeah,
3
we'll
more
get there.
clips. Here we go. So the next one is him with Dennis Prager this time. I was incorrect. It was Jonathan Pageau last time.
I thought, who would have the audacity to claim that they believed in God,
This guy.
examined the way they lived? Who would dare say that?
What's at the finger?
To believe, you think, to believe in a Christian sense.
He's
to
double-clicking
actually-
on it.
Nietzsche said there was only ever one Christian, and that was Christ. To have the audacity to claim that means that you live it out fully. And that's an unbearable task in some sense.
Let's go.
So, yeah, again, that's back to him talking about, I think he's tremendously weighing the consequences of the severity of the claim.
Weigh
That's
the
an
cost.
older
What
clip.
is it going to take to become a disciple, right?
No, but
you must pick up your cross.
He doesn't understand imputed righteousness. That's the point. See, there's a theological gap. See, he's exactly right. Nietzsche was also exactly right. There was only ever one Christian. There's only ever one Christ. There's only ever one perfect righteousness, and that's Jesus. And when we stand before God at the great white throne judgment, the only thing he will see is Jesus. Like, that's the point. There is only one Christ. Like,
That's right.
That's what you don't get, Jordan. Or maybe you didn't get. Maybe you're coming to understand that. But, like, that's the point.
Well, he was sitting in front of Dennis Prager. He's not going to offer him that. He doesn't have it either.
That's true.
That's
Right.
true. But what I'm saying, did you see my point? That like he is. This gets back to the sense of why he's struggling with this, because he knows he's not righteous. He knows
Yes,
he
knows.
can't
You are
claim.
right.
So if
You
he
are
believes that God exists, he is acting as a man who believes that God exists, but he's not acting as a man who knows that Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. Like, that's what he needs to get through his head. And I think he's getting there. You know, if he's not maybe getting there already. But that's a deeper thing, and I don't think a lot of Christians really get that.
Yeah. To your
Correct.
point, though, I think the big piece that he's missing is, to use your simple framing, for the Bible tells me so, he is not really relying on divine authority and revelation to come to his
That is
conclusions. And that's why
That is
some of
correct.
these relatively small steps, and why I talk about him straddling that line, is because he's okay with the things he feels like he's sort of gotten to, like, on his own or whatever. He thinks
Right.
he's gotten to them on his own. And then isn't able to make these other leaps that are self-evident to people who have, been exposed to it more consistently in a more traditional way.
Yeah,
Correct.
no, you're not wrong. And I would say we see that again. So in this second to last clip, he's with Dennis Prager again, and he very much continues to double click on the thread of your actions around how holy you are in your belief. And so I can't unsee that this seems to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks that Jordan has in this journey, where he will be on stage and say the Lord's Prayer, be on his knees praying to, safe to say, God, and what we've seen in all these other clips. But it's kind of sad to say, if I'm honest, I've never seen this much contrition of the sin inside of oneself from a Christian. And it's beautiful to see in him.
A lot of Christians that have like celebrity pastors that have fallen, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's or just, you're right. And Christians in general, it's just like this idea of, you know, sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to
normal, though.
that
I don't
thought.
think you can indict Christians, even
Correct.
true Christians generally, because this is kind of the meat offered to idols things, right? That was a reflection of weak new Christians being besides themselves with guilt for any little thing that could be construed as, you know, dishonor to God, and more mature Christians saying, like, hey, man, you're going to get used to seeing the gap between you and God, and it's not always going to hit you that hard, and some things are just meat. You know,
And we're
Well,
called.
and that's true, Tim. I think that absolutely is true for right theology. But Martin Luther struggled with his own sin,
Correct.
and all his life, was horrified by his own sin. And there's a big Reformed tradition of, Jonathan Edwards of, sinners in the hands of an angry God. Of God is just dangling you over the pits of hell by his sheer
God
goodness
is
of will.
dangling you over the pits of hell by his simple
There by
pleasure
the
that
grace
you
of
continue
God,
to
there
so
is
I.
definitely
Yeah.
right.
These are
But
not
yeah,
incompatible thoughts.
No, they're not. But the difference is no, you're absolutely right. But it's this, right? This is what it comes down to. This is why it's so important to know Jesus, because I am being dangled over hell and the precipice of hell by a single thread, the love of Christ. And I'm
name
so
is Jesus.
thankful that the more I know Jesus, the less concerned I am about that.
Yeah,
Like,
the assurance does actually stabilize you over
That's
time.
what it
That's
is.
right.
Over time,
Except my
as
comment was the assurance does stabilize you, but it should never cause us to stop grieving it.
Of course.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Well, what do you mean?
Because
by
I don't
want
want
to.
to.
What do you mean by
never
grief? Because I
lose
think there's
sight.
a different definition on
Sorrow over our sin.
Oh,
Grief
yeah,
over
sure.
new
that
sin.
which
Yeah, new
separates
sin,
us
for
from
sure.
God. I'm just
Yeah.
acknowledging how Jordan seems to be taking that very seriously.
Oh, I agree with you, Nick.
that.
I think he's at
I'm
that.
down for a little bit of self-flagellation. You know.
Okay, easy there, Opus Dei.
Hey,
Anyway,
that could be our first product. That could be our first product.
Little barbed nine tails.
Dan Brown called. He wants his theology back. Speaking
I
of
know,
Martin
well,
Luther.
let's just
Anyway.
say if we're based on like the spectrum of who we call as the circle, and now granted maybe Tim's in a smaller circle, but the circle, if we look Catholic on this side, right, that Jordan Peterson is definitely going to purgatory from a Catholic standpoint. Like that's
Yeah.
where he's at. Maybe
But
he's
look,
not full on, but
So one thing, like just to double click on Nick's double click, the thing that
I hate you so much.
we've got never go for a time. This is what happens. Anyway, so the whole idea that we should this is a common thing is he's a new Christian. There is a higher level of grief upon the loss. Look how old this man is. Like I got saved at 4. I have moments of continual grief of you have sin and you have seasons of dryness or seasons of loss and regret. Imagine being a 60-year-old man and coming face to face with Jesus and looking at how you've dealt with your children, how you've dealt with your wife, what you've done in your professional career, the sins of which nobody knows that you can't speak, and just I would hope he has what we're going to see from that is different. I don't want people to think though, because that is where the asceticists and the idea of isolating ourselves and self-flagellation and these very real things that came from the Catholic Church came from. That's not it, because we're not given.
one's
We're supposed to live in
suggesting that
freedom
here.
and victory, and that's
Right.
my point. The more you come to know
Amen.
Jesus, the more you come to know and appreciate both the power, the safety, the security, and the love that sets us there. So anyway, yeah.
All right,
and
let's
that's a
hop
little
in.
bit of a
Oh,
sad
go
thing.
ahead.
Sorry, real quick. That's a little bit of a sad thing to watch with Jordan Peterson, because it's like, bro, if you just committed, you don't have to live in this perpetual state of terror and guilt. because he doesn't have that
take
assurance.
the wheel.
Yeah, no, right.
Gosh.
Anyway, next
On
clip.
that note, Jesus take the wheel.
To be able to accept
Oh,
the structure
hold
of
on.
existence, the suffering that goes along with it, and the disappointment and the betrayal, and to
Is that how you watch
nonetheless-
YouTube? Do you actually
that?
watch on double?
I do.
with all
I listen to it double. I
Hey,
have to,
stop.
man.
I was doing my research to get ready for this.
your
Hush.
heart, right? To dispense with the malevolence and your desire for destruction and revenge and all of that, and to face things courageously and to tell the truth, to speak the truth and to act it out. That's what it means to believe. That's what it means. It doesn't mean to state it. It means to act it out. And unless you act it out, you should be very careful about claiming it. And so I've never been comfortable saying anything other than
It's fair.
I try to act as if God exists, because God only knows what you'd be if you truly believed. I mean, if you think about it in some sense, that's the central idea in Christianity, is that if you were capable of believing, it would be a transfiguring event, a truly transfiguring event. And I know people experience that to one degree or another, but we have no idea what the limit of that is. And we have no idea
Facts.
what the possibility is within each person if they lived a life that was maximally courageous and maximally truthful. You know, because maybe you're running at 60% or 70% or 20% and at cross purposes to yourself. God only knows what you'd be if you believed. And so,
Sorry,
Well,
I can't deal with this
I try
ad
to
on the
act
side
like
of your
I
screen
believe.
right
Yeah.
now. I just-
but I'd never
I
claim that I
know.
manage
What
it.
is this? Get prep for free.
That last line was important. You missed it.
Sorry.
But you
Sorry,
said,
I'm sorry.
And so, well, I try to act like I believe, but I'd never claim that I manage it, because it's a lot to manage properly. And you have to be careful about claiming to manage things that you can't manage.
So anyway, that's that. I think. I mean, that's him being pretty overt, saying he acts as if it's true.
Yeah,
I
but
mean-
that's just, again, Josh pointing out, like, he's lacking the imputed righteousness. That's why he's uncertain of it. There's a reason that you can say that you believe, that you can claim it, as it were. And it's not because of your own merit or because you're, perfectly acting out the consequences of that belief.
And you know who's to blame for this? The Roman Catholic Church. Because, and I'll tell you why, because his wife's
Well,
a
it's not just
Catholic.
that you got the Greek or
No,
Greek
no,
or-
well,
oh wait,
yeah,
hold on.
okay.
What are you talking about?
Well, his wife's a Catholic, all right?
Okay.
And this is who he spends his time with, and this is who he's talking to, and probably a large part of his exposure to this. And so there is a much higher premium on this notion of, the forgiveness, the non-works-based focus of sanctification, not sanctification, but of transformation, right? The salvific nature, the means by which we receive the Holy Spirit and the ability of the Holy Spirit to work in our lives. This is something that for him, Protestant theology is going to be a real hard thing for him to wrap his brain around, because to be honest, like Catholic and Orthodox theology feed into his insecurity.
Yeah.
I could see that. And he's done a lot of work with Jonathan Pageau, who is equally in that thread of religion.
And so if he's not in that place, if he sees it that way, it's going to continue. Yeah, it's not helpful. But I see his reservation in that. But that's something a lot of people struggle with. Yeah. And
Well,
I have to be perfect. Like I see this in. Hold on, Josh, real quick. Sorry, I know.
Go ahead. Yeah.
This is something that a lot of people struggle with. That I do want to point out, because I do think it has to do with where we're at in our country right now. And I struggle with this. If I'm not perfect, I'm not going to raise the flag. I know what I believe, but if especially among young people, that I don't want to be a hypocrite, because we all hate hypocrites. And when we were younger and we looked at the people around us and those Christians and why we're not into organized religions, and maybe we resented the Christians we grew up with because they said one thing but they did another thing, and they claimed to be Christian, and they went and did all this stuff. And hypocrisy is like cancer, especially when you're young, because you're all about ideas and you're trying to
authenticity,
to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
And so then what you do is you say, if I can't be perfect, I won't raise the flag. And that's the problem. That's the problem. You raise the flag because you are either part of the team or you're not part of the team.
Can I just jump in on that? Just triple click there for a second, because the
triple click.
It's one of the most irritating fallacies that I see. People like, oh well, everybody's a hypocrite because nobody. But you're either a hypocrite. It's like, that's not what hypocrisy means, and it's super irritating to me. That's just become ingrained in our zeitgeist that hypocrisy is just failing to live up to your standards. You don't say someone's a hypocrite. Like if you say a pastor's a hypocrite, you're not saying he's a hypocrite because he's not literally perfect in living a sinless life and adhering to all of the you're saying he's a hypocrite because you don't think he actually agrees with the words that are coming out of his mouth. That is hypocrisy. That's what Jesus charged the Pharisees with. Hypocrisy is not failing to live up to your standards, and nobody lives up to their standards. And so if that's your definition of hypocrisy, it's meaningless. Go back to the real definition, where it's someone who's basically lying to you, and the thing that's giving away the lie is their actions.
Yeah, intent.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, that's
What were you gonna
really
say, Josh?
quite good.
Excellent. That was great. Let's get to the next clip.
So yeah,
I'll find an opening for it. I didn't want to take
clip.
off that.
Let me just preface this. The final clip is the crescendo, though it is not overtly a crescendo, because this goes back to the Elon Musk episode we did, where he hinted, or Elon Musk said he was baptized as a kid, and so you have to pay attention or you're going to miss it. But Jordan Peterson, I've never seen him do this. And if you haven't watched the whole episode with John Rich, I've never seen anyone press Jordan so hard on Christianity and professing your faith in Christ than John Rich did in the whole episode. And this is just a short clip from that episode.
Someone like yourself, if you became absolutely convinced, yes, that's real. Wow. It is terrifying. It is terrible. But you said, if you told him, I am turning my life over to you, do what you will with me, and you really did that. If you were willing to do that,
I already did that.
What a situation!
Long time ago.
You did?
I did that a long time ago. Yeah.
So how is it that
I know the truth sets you free.
Yeah,
I understand.
So that's it. I mean, again, he says those two things of, I believe that the existence of Christ, and I did that a long time ago. And we could watch 100 other clips of Jordan Peterson talking about,
and they were all
his
older.
faith, but
That was
okay,
the most
the problem
recent.
is that we're gambling money. We need to be gambling.
That's why
we
I
need
don't
to
think
be
anybody's
gambling
won the bet.
something that we'll have in heaven when we know for sure
There you
if
go.
we're right.
Oh, crowns.
Like crowns?
We gotta give out some crowns. Yes.
Crowns?
Yes.
Can we
What's
just
the-
like?
I don't know what the rules are of that.
What-
We'll have to look into
I don't
that.
know, but I mean, obviously, we're all going to cast him at the foot of the throne anyway. But could we have a little like settling of side bets prior
Right.
to that?
Is there like a side
while
pot?
we're
Can
in
we
line?
side pot?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm looking at. Yeah, I know, right? I'm looking at the poly market
Please
odds
don't
for
strike
Jordan
us right
Peterson
now.
to create
Please don't strike
Christian.
us right now.
No, he gets it. He has a sense of
I
humor.
know.
I think.
The thing.
Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Josh.
I was gonna say the thing when he says that I know the truth will set you free. The way he defines that is not
Right.
super biblical.
Yeah, he says
Determined,
those
like,
things
that's
that
the
you
thing.
think, you're a Christian, and then he keeps talking, and you're like,
Stop it! Just cut it
Listen,
off
I
right
said it
there.
already.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, if I find out that there was a secret baptism, then we're in business. But like,
Russell
that's what I'm
Brand,
waiting
by
on.
the way, will
Russell
baptize him.
Brand,
Just wait.
baptizing
He's been baptizing
Peterson in his
everybody.
tidy whities. That's what I want to see.
Because it's not. To be clear, baptism is not what saves you, but baptism is the public proclamation to say
That's what's missing.
hold me
here.
accountable. This is
That's
what I
what's
believe.
missing here.
Yeah.
And so that's what
Yeah.
the thumbnail's going to be: Jordan Peterson getting baptized by Russell Brand. And
Brand in his
Bro,
tiny whities.
that's the thumbnail. That's it. I already nailed it. But
That's so perfect.
But
Oh my God.
here's what we're
That's
gonna
so
land
funny.
at. Here's what I want to land at, because here's what I think is important. We are in a period in our society where we need to care more about being on the right side than we need to care about unity with the world. So I'm talking about holiness. I'm talking about righteousness. I'm talking about saying that something is right and something is wrong. You know, I'm gonna make a statement that was about a political event triggered, but I am not endorsing one candidate or the other. But I'm gonna make a statement about this. When I was watching some commentary on one of Kamala Harris's interviews, there was a lot of dialogue about why it bothers people that she is changing her perspectives on things. And what hit me in that moment was pretty simple. Her whole message in her campaign is all about moving forward in unity and bringing us all together. And what I think there's a large portion of our society that doesn't understand that we have realized that there are people in our country who have beliefs that are fundamentally different from others, like on the measure of right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And unity is not what we're interested in.
Breach.
Unity is not what fellowship does light have with darkness. What we are interested in are leaders who are proclaiming that there is light and there is dark, not that dark and light can live and mingle and coexist together and pursue the same ends. And that is fundamentally where we are as a society. So I'm not speaking about that in a political sense. That is the thing that highlighted this thought in my head. But the way it relates to Jordan Peterson is this is what fundamentally comes down to. That Jordan has to understand the need to raise the flag, the need for public admission of faith, the need to pick a side, the need to not placate.
Because of the time that we're in today.
Correct. Because we are not here to, like, the world is blessed through the distinction of when we live righteous lives, holy lives, and when we give a testimony to the reason for that it happens because of Christ, and that it is because he is different, because he created us for this, that before time he predestined us, humanity, for righteousness. And so if we should look different, we should say we're different. We should not be okay with being the same, with flying under the same national banner. God disinherited the nations. He created new nations. He took a nation for himself. He called it Israel, and it was to be holy. And through its holiness, the world would be blessed. The church is that now. You can get into that. Blow up in the comment section.
Are you saying that the church is Israel?
Calm down. Everyone calm down. All right. Holiness,
if
righteousness.
You are still
pick a
here, that was
Amen.
amazing.
Amen.
Like and subscribe. We're honored you're with us. This has been one of my favorite episodes we've done. And gentlemen, that was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for putting it together, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for double clicking on those.
I triple clicked on it to make sure it was right just for you.
Donate to the I'm Telling God About This Patreon to cover
again. Remember, you can also listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts. So give us
Just kidding. We don't have
listen.
a Patreon. It would be cool if we did.
Well, this podcast is costing me money, not like I had to go and buy a whole new carry knife so I can have the belly cutter.
Dude, I want to see it.
I'm not responsible for that.
What if you drive off a bridge and you're in the water? How are you gonna mess with a 5-point harness while the car is sinking? And I'm like,
Tim is like,
that's a good point.
New fear unlocked.
Is it assisted? Is it an assisted blade?
Does it
it's little
push the
little
button?
That's
spring.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome. No, that's not assisted.
All right.
But anyway.
No, it is.
See you guys later. Good episode. And,
Until next time.
Civilization, all you have 20 years
meant to. Get off my lawn.